Hello everybody, and thank you for joining today's webinar on the Customer Service Specialist Standard. My name is Dominic Green. I'm the Technical Advisor for Business for City and Guilds. Joining me today is my colleague Rebecca Hollenby, the Endpoint Assessment Partnership Manager for City and Guilds, and Rebecca will be looking at the processes involved with booking endpoint assessment towards the end of the slide deck. So today we are going to look at the Customer Service Specialist Level 3. This particular standard has 3 assessment methods: a portfolio-based professional discussion, a work-based project with an interview, and a practical observation followed by questions and answers. We strongly advise that the observation is carried out after the portfolio-based professional discussion. So, what apprentices need to learn as far as on-programme is concerned? We know that every apprentice needs to complete 20% of the job during that on-programme period, and we need to ensure that this is completed prior to Gateway. I've highlighted there the relevant knowledge, skills and behaviours which need to be covered during on-programme. As far as Gateway is concerned, in order to get through Gateway, the apprentice must show evidence of the relevant customer service knowledge, skills and behaviours set out through those 3 different assessment methods. They must of course also have achieved Maths and English at level 2. This must be evidenced in order to go through Gateway. Evidence can include certification and it can also include PLR data. So on to endpoint assessment and grading. Endpoint assessment is indeed the final stage that the apprentice goes through to complete their apprenticeship. The apprentice must demonstrate all of the knowledge, skills and behaviours required within the Customer Service Specialist Assessment Plan. There's 2 grades available, either a pass or a distinction. In order to achieve a pass, the apprentice must be successful in all 3 key assessment areas. Like many other standards, in order for the apprentice to achieve a distinction, an apprentice must achieve a distinction in all 3 assessment methods also. If a pass is achieved in only one assessment criteria, then unfortunately a distinction is not available and could not be achieved. So what are the entry requirements for endpoint assessment? As we've mentioned previously, an apprentice must have achieved level 2 in English and Maths before taking endpoint assessment. The portfolio must be also completed in order for Gateway to be triggered. The portfolio would naturally be created on programme within that 3 to 12 months onwards, or depending on how long on programme is. Gateway can only be triggered from month 12 onwards. The learner and the employer, alongside the training provider, must also complete the Gateway Declaration form and must be signed by those 3 parties. In order for good practice, the endpoint assessment must be booked 90 days in advance of the endpoint assessment actually taking place. So, moving on to the portfolio-based professional discussion. The knowledge, skills and behaviours it should cover have been outlined below. A minimum of 10 pieces of evidence for the portfolio and a maximum of 15 pieces of evidence has been stipulated. This must be submitted no later than 2 weeks prior to the endpoint assessment actually being carried out. We've got to remember then that the evidence within the portfolio is not directly assessed, so no grading will come to the portfolio itself. The grading will actually be based around the professional discussion rather than which will be in turn based around the portfolio. The method of collecting the apprentice's evidence is in its usual format. We're looking for the best evidence formed by the apprentice, which is of a holistic overview. It's submitted electronically to the City and Guilds e-portal, which means if you are using an electronic portfolio of your own, you must download that evidence from that electronic portfolio and re-upload to our City and Guilds e-portal. What forms of examples can we put into the portfolio? We're looking for witness statements, perhaps customer feedback, maybe management feedback, reflective accounts, PDPs, CDP logs, etc. It could be that we're drilling down further into, say, a report, what's looking at complaints handling, etc. Essentially, we need to ask the question, does the evidence selected follow the below? Which piece holistically and most efficiently gives evidence which will cover the relevant knowledge, skills and behaviours? Is it the best evidence of the learner? Does it meet all the requirements for distinction grade? In order to be meeting our DFE rules, we must cross-reference each criteria to the relevant piece of evidence. Although a little hypocritical, this doesn't mean coming to an assessment decision, but simply marking on the matrix where the evidence maps across to those KSBs. The apprentice must also formally declare that all their work is their own. The actual endpoint assessment can be completed either face-to-face or remotely, but must be conducted in a suitably controlled environment. Ideally, the professional discussion which is based around the portfolio would be conducted on the same day as the observation. The duration for this is 60 minutes with a 10% tolerance. The supporting documents that we offer are the portfolio referencing form to map all the evidence across to the KSBs, otherwise known as a matrix form, the gateway declaration form which must be signed by the employer, provider and apprentice, and the professional discussion grade descriptors table which can be found in the endpoint assessment pack. We've also got exemplar materials and the preparation tool which can be found on Smart Screen under the endpoint assessment preparation tab. So moving on to the work-based project and the interview that follows it. I've highlighted there the knowledge, skills and behaviours that the project and interview should cover. The slight change to the project here is that it must be carried out after Gateway, within that duration of a 2-month period. Prior to the project being conducted, a proposal would be required. That proposal would be approximately 200 words and will be sent in to City and Guilds to seek approval prior to the project going ahead. The project would be submitted 2 weeks prior to the endpoint assessment, as with the portfolio. The final report, which would be generated by the apprentice around the project, would be approximately 2,500 words in length with a 10% tolerance. Again, it's holistically assessed and the gradings would be fail, pass or distinction. The apprentice's responses in the interview will be assessed in addition to the project. The interview is there to ensure competence is at its highest by the apprentice. It might be to upskill the learner also from the difference between a pass or a distinction, or indeed for the apprentice to get over the line to achieve a pass. The interview itself will focus on the written work-based project and any supporting annexes. During that interview, the apprentice will be asked 10 competency-based questions by the independent endpoint assessor. Furthermore, just to ensure competence is there, it might be the case that the apprentice is asked a further number of questions around the project in order to demonstrate competence. A representative from the organisation can be present but only to observe. The representative will not be allowed to intervene in any way. Again, this interview around the project can be conducted face-to-face or remotely. However, we would normally suggest it's completed on the same day as the observation. Naturally, the interview would be needed to be in a controlled environment where nobody will disturb that interview. So what should that actual report cover around the project? I've highlighted below there the key areas which should be covered by the apprentice. It should also cover further areas such as recommendations for future improvements, looking at the reflective side of the project of how it could be improved and what was successful. With regards to documents to support the work-based project and interview, we have work-based project proposal form, the grade descriptors table which can be found in the endpoint assessment pack, and again further exemplar materials in the smart screen under endpoint assessment preparation tab. So moving on to the practical observation, which is then followed by question and answers. Again, I've highlighted the knowledge, skills and behaviours that the practical observation and Q&A should cover. So a key area of the practical observation is that naturally it should include customer interaction. We expect the apprentice to undertake a range of day-to-day workplace activities within the apprentice's workplace, interaction with at least 3 different customer types, and of course we need to ensure that the time of day is considered when the observation takes place. The importance of the timings is critical. We need the apprentice to be as busy as possible to ensure that the apprentice has the opportunity to demonstrate full competence throughout those knowledge, skills and behaviours. It might be then that the question and answers are carried out to seek further clarification of the competence of the apprentice. It might be that during that observation not everything can be viewed. This then can be picked up by the question and answer session. The time allowance for this observation is 60 minutes, again with a 10% tolerance. The documents to support the practical observation, again, are the grade descriptors table found in the endpoint assessment pack and further exemplar materials in the smart screen. Resources and information to support. As per Customer Service Practitioner Level 2, we also have the Apprenticeship Training Manual for Customer Service Specialist. This outlines English and Maths functional skills and maps across all the key areas. The Apprenticeship Training Manual has several tasks in there which are mapped across to the standard, which will provide underpinning knowledge around the key knowledge, skills and behaviours for the apprentice. We also have tutor support within our smart screen package. This is more tutor focused and has areas such as lesson plans, schemes of work, PowerPoints, activities. Our final package is the enhanced smart screen. It incorporates everything you would find in the tutor smart screen, but also has interactive videos, activities, etc. They allow for contextualizing of the information required for the knowledge, skills and behaviours to be integrated more successfully and give the learner a better experience whilst learning. So a brief recap. The code for City and Guilds Customer Service Specialist will be 9494. Registration dates from 7th of November 2018 and EPA booking is now live. We also have a qualification which maps 100% across to the endpoint assessment. If you're looking to add provision to your add value to your provision, then the 2794-03 qualification is indeed a Customer Service Specialist diploma. So just to recap, the endpoint assessment methods for Customer Service Specialist is a project with an interview, an observation followed by question and answers, and a professional discussion with portfolio evidence. The assessment plan suggests a typical duration is 15 months, however that can be extended. The funding is £4,000 and as previously mentioned, the Apprenticeship Training Manual and Smart Screen and tutor resources are now available. The EPA costs are currently at £750. I'm now going to pass over to my colleague Rebecca Hollenby, who can go through the processes.